Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of her realms and territories overseas. Queen, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith, the inheritor of a continuous tradition of monarchy stretching back 11 centuries, the personal symbol of the British state. That's one aspect of Queen Elizabeth, the constitutional figurehead. There is another, a woman 51 years old, a wife and mother, a family woman who, for all the astonishing variety of her life, or perhaps because of it, seems never to be happier than when she's with her husband and children. She's also a queen who, more than any other British monarch, has shown a personal concern to meet ordinary men and women at home and abroad. In the 25 years of her reign, the world and Britain's place in it has changed. But in all the uncertainties of that process, Queen Elizabeth's popularity has remained high, and in this, her Jubilee year, she's probably closer to the lives of her subjects than ever before. In a country with a long respect for royalty, Elizabeth's always held a special place in the public's affections. She and her sister Margaret, 4 years younger, captivated the nation, both as children and young women. Before the age of television, their progress was followed through photographs and newsreel stories like this one, a cycle outing on the royal estates in Scotland. During the war, the teenage princess began to meet regularly with a tall, handsome Navy officer called Philip Mountbatten, the only son of Prince Andrew of Greece. In July 1947, the couple were engaged, and in November married. Their wedding a welcome bright spot for the nation in the dreary days of post-war austerity. Within 3 years, 2 children, a son, Charles, born in 1948, and a daughter, Anne, in 1950. Both names long neglected by British royalty, and their choice showed in a small way a definite break with the past. For the princess, there now began preparations for the inevitable day she'd succeed her father, King George VI. It came sooner than anyone expected. The king was ill for much of 1951, but seemed to make a good recovery from an operation to remove a lung, so much so that the Australasian tour of his daughter and Prince Philip went ahead early the next year. The king himself saw the couple off from London Airport on a cold, grey day at the end of January. He had but a week to live. First stop on the royal tour was Kenya, where the princess and her husband stayed at a game lodge called Treetops. It was here on February the 6th, 1952, that Prince Philip broke the news to his wife that her father had died. While a nation mourned, the king's daughter returned home as Queen Elizabeth II. She was 25, by coincidence, the same age as Elizabeth I, when she'd come to the throne nearly 4 centuries before. The grief of this occasion eased in the following months, and the whole country began to look forward to a ceremony that's rarely matched even in a history as rich as England's, the greatest of all royal pageants, the coronation of a monarch. June 2nd, 1953, a public holiday for the British people, a day of great national rejoicing. In the magnificent gold state coach, drawn by 8 Windsor Greys, the young Queen set off to Westminster for her crowning. The day itself was grey and drizzly, but nothing could dampen the spirits of the vast crowds on London's streets. Thousands had camped out all night to ensure a good view of the procession. Inside Westminster Abbey, 7,000 guests from all over the world. The Queen entered to the traditional cry in Latin from the scholars of Westminster School, Vivat, Vivat Regina, long live the Queen. Facing this young woman, a 3-hour ordeal of the most elaborate ritual in the Anglican Church, beginning with the presentation of the monarch for recognition by the Archbishop of Canterbury.
I here present unto you Queen Elizabeth, your undoubted Queen. Wherefore all you who are come this day to do your homage and service, are you willing to do the same? The crown of the faithful.
The moment of crowning. The massive St. Edward's crown, used only at coronations, weighs over 5 pounds.
On whose head this day thou dost place it for a sign of royal majesty.
After a recess, Queen Elizabeth II proceeded in full regalia down the Abbey to meet her subjects. In the euphoria of that day, it was easy to believe what was in fact a popular illusion of the time, that a new splendid era had dawned for Britain, a time of prosperity and influence to match the original Elizabethan age. Only a minority of the Queen's people were English, so 5 months later, a full Commonwealth tour, over 40,000 miles in 173 days. Even today, it's still the most extensive royal tour of her reign. It began in the Caribbean, among some of her youngest subjects. Through the Pacific Islands to New Zealand and Australia, a great variety of scene, but a universality of welcome. Back home, the end of an era. In 1955, Winston Churchill retired. One of his last acts as Prime Minister was a private dinner for the Queen and Prince Philip at 10 Downing Street. The 80-year-old leader had accepted a knighthood 2 years earlier only as a personal gift from the Queen, the reward of a grateful monarch from a thankful nation. The changing world brought new challenges for Britain, but not everyone realized the meaning of them. The growth of mass communications, especially television, brought the ceremonial of state occasions into everyone's living room. The opening of Parliament was first televised in 1958 and regularly after that. With such impressive displays of the trappings of power, it was easy to ignore the real retreat from imperial greatness.
My Lord and members of the House of Commons, my government, in cooperation...
But the power of Britain to act alone was gone, just as surely as the monarch's power to govern. And as the West drew together for collective strength, the Queen had her own part to play as a royal ambassador for Britain. First, the reassurance of old allies. In 1959, a summer tour of North America, where President Eisenhower joined the Queen and Canadian ministers for the official inauguration of the St. Lawrence Seaway, opening up the heart of America to large ocean-going ships. In the evening, a glittering state ball to mark the occasion. In 1965, a call on Britain's new allies, a state visit to West Germany, including a brief tour of West Berlin. It was the first time a reigning British monarch had set foot in Germany for over 50 years, and it was widely seen as setting the seal on Germany's return to the international community, ending the antagonisms left over from World War II. Meanwhile, the Queen's children were growing up, and their progress was followed just as eagerly as her own childhood had been. The wider use of film and television, and the royal family's tolerance of it, meant few developments went uncovered. On occasions, the Queen herself introduced a more informal style to royalty's contacts with the public. This charity fair at Balmoral in the 50s, for example, with the Queen and Prince Philip acting as stallholders. It was an easy, relaxed atmosphere for Charles and Anne to grow up in. Some official functions, too, had a touch of the unorthodox about them. This visit in 1958 to a Scottish coal mine, for example. It showed an interest in the lives of ordinary working people that was much appreciated by the workers themselves. Another break with tradition was Prince Charles's education, which his parents decided should not be by a private tutor, but at school in the company of boys his own age. As a 9-year-old, he went to Cheam, a preparatory school which his father had also attended as a child. Charles's sister Anne was already getting to close quarters with her favourite animals, the early beginnings of a career that would not only make her one of the world's best horsewomen, but would eventually lead to personal romance. Romance, too, for the Queen's sister Margaret. She decided in 1955 not to marry a former member of King George's staff who was divorced. But in 1960, the princess became engaged to royal photographer Tony Armstrong-Jones. And on a sunny day in May, she went as a bride into Westminster Abbey on the arm of Prince Philip. Chief among her 8 bridesmaids, Princess Anne, only 9 years old. But the undoubted happiness of this day didn't last. 2 children, and 16 years later, the princess and her husband agreed to live apart. In the early 1960s, another round of foreign tours. The Queen was no longer Empress of India, yet paradoxically, in this most anti-colonial of countries, she was sometimes treated as though she were. Certainly the colour and ceremonial of events like this recalled the heyday of the British Raj, and it was all hugely enjoyable. In West Africa, too, the winds of change of the 1960s didn't blow unkindly on her. She went to Ghana and Sierra Leone in 1961. There were fears that anti-colonial feelings might be expressed in riots against her presence. But in the event, the welcomes could hardly have been more enchanting, whether in a market in Accra or watching diamond panning in Sierra Leone. The 1960s also saw additions to the Queen's family. Prince Andrew, second in line to the throne, was born in 1960, and Prince Edward in 1964. All the Queen's children have quite distinct characters. Anne, direct and forceful like her father. Andrew, given to practical joking. By contrast, Charles is more withdrawn, more sensitive to other people's feelings. When these pictures were taken, he was 17 and about to begin a 6-month course at Geelong School in Australia. In the adventurous outdoor climate of Geelong, Charles gained measurably in maturity and self-confidence. When he came home, he went on to Trinity College, Cambridge, for a degree in archaeology, and after that to Wales, to Aberystwyth College for a course in Welsh language and culture, an essential preparation for his formal investiture as Prince of Wales. The occasion was marked by a splendid ceremony at Carnarvon Castle. Not all Welsh people liked the idea. Leading up to the investiture, there were 14 bomb explosions carried out by Welsh nationalists. But the day itself passed off perfectly, with the prince kneeling to receive from his mother the regalia of his princedom. First, the coronet, specially made for the occasion. Then, after the sword and mace, the purple and ermine cloak. Finally, according to the ancient order of investiture, the Prince of Wales swore a touching oath of allegiance to his sovereign.
I, Charles, Prince of Wales, do become your liege man of life and limb, and of earthly worship, and faith and truth I will bear unto thee, to live and die against all manner of folks.
The ritual over, the mood changed to one of celebration as the Queen proceeded to the castle walls to show the Welsh their prince. For Princess Anne too, momentous events. Her equestrian skills improved with virtually every contest she entered in her teens, and by the time she was 21, she was competing at the highest international levels. In 1971, she won the European three-day event championship. Also interested in these events was Captain Mark Phillips, a young Guards officer, and from now on, Anne was often seen in his company. 2 years later, they became engaged. And in November 1973, they were the central characters in another of those glittering royal occasions. Inevitably, it was the wedding of the year. Princess Anne's personality had not always endeared her to the British people, but on November 14th, she disarmed all critics. Thousands thronged the streets of the capital to wish every happiness to a young woman who, by general consent, was a very beautiful bride. Inside Westminster Abbey, 2,000 guests from all over Europe watched the princess approach the altar on the arm of her father. Millions more followed the proceedings on television.
O Lord, bless them both, and grant them to inherit thy everlasting kingdom through Jesus.
After the service, the happy couple began their impressive procession down the Abbey, beginning with their acknowledgement to the Queen. Like all mothers on such occasions, the Queen looked long and longingly as her only daughter went down the aisle. Outside Buckingham Palace, it was like the coronation all over again, with crowds pressing against the gates to cheer and wave at the newlyweds on the balcony. The cheers were also partly for the Queen and Prince Philip, who'd celebrated their own silver wedding anniversary the year before, and who in Jubilee year were to become grandparents. In recent years, more foreign tours for the Queen and Duke. In 1976, they were guests of honor at America's bicentennial celebrations, welcomed warmly to the White House by President Ford. There were informal moments too, the now familiar walkabout and a few relaxed words with lucky Americans who showed as much enthusiasm for the Queen as the British themselves. And in her Jubilee year, the Queen met another American president for the first time, Jimmy Carter, on a visit to London with 6 other heads of government for an economic summit. President Carter had already taken the British by storm and seemed to be just as much a hit with their monarch. Also in Jubilee year, another Commonwealth tour to those Pacific islands which had so entranced her after the coronation. This time she was no doubt more prepared for the rather vociferous Maori welcome. All this informality is, of course, a far cry from much of the ancient ceremonial of England in which the Queen is inevitably involved. The procession of the Garter Knights, for example. It was in 1348 that King Edward III picked up his dancing partner's garter and silenced his mocking retinue by creating an order in its honour. The Knights of the Garter are a very select company indeed. There are only 24 of them at any one time, and the honour is a personal gift from the sovereign, not a state decoration. Yet, despite the order's antiquity, the robes and headdress are only 18th century. The yearly parade always attracts large crowds to Royal Windsor. Jubilee year in Britain is a time for both Queen and country to take stock of the monarchy. In Queen Elizabeth's reign, much has changed, not least in the sovereign's relationship with her subjects. Scenes like these, filmed at Balmoral Castle earlier this year at the Queen's request, would have been quite unthinkable even in her father's time. They show just how far the Queen has moved with the times, how she's democratized the monarchy. In Britain, 1977 is a year of festivities, and already there have been some vintage events. Here at Windsor in May, the Queen herself expressed interest in a huge rally of another great British institution, the Rolls-Royce car. This is just the beginning. Before Christmas, there'll be rallies, bonfires, and street parties throughout the land. But it's unlikely that any of them will match the great celebrations that take place every year, such as Trooping the Colour. Every year since the Battle of Trafalgar, the Sovereign's birthday has been marked by parading the flag of a regiment before the monarch. It's still one of the most impressive ceremonies in the royal calendar, and perhaps more than any other, represents the proud and dignified traditions of the British Crown. In preserving these traditions while bringing herself closer to the public, Queen Elizabeth has made a unique contribution to the development of the British monarchy. And many Britons this year will be pleased to echo the words of their national anthem and declare, "Long live our noble Queen."